All right, we are live here at Great Oak High School in Period 1, my Algebra 1. Let's greet each other properly. Good morning, guys. All right, we're going to get into a review of all four methods. So let's open up your notes to our first lesson. It's Q2. All right, second lesson, it should say in your notes, solve by factoring. And we're going to go through a couple equations here together, and we're going to solve them by factoring. And we're going to go through all four methods together here, and we're going to use our notes to facilitate. The first lesson went through by simplifying roots, but the first main lesson of solving quadratics was done by factoring. And in the margin here, get out your red pens too while you're at it, because I'm going to put in a couple notes, a couple key points. The very first thing you need to do, and when you take a look at an equation, is notice if there's a GCF, okay? And there is, and you got to factor out, and let's write this in the margin, factor out the GCF and try to create what's called a zero product. Factor out GCF and create a zero product, because right now this is not a product, this is sum of two terms. So you can't use the zero product rule. All right, so hands up, one hand up for me, show me the GCF of 3 and 18 on your fingers. Real quick response, please. Okay, and everybody's showing me 3. Should be 3. 3 divides into 6 and 18. And there's also an x in common, so we need to factor out a 3x. So let's go ahead and do that. And write small, by the way, because we got to fit everything in these little boxes here. Now 3x times x gives you 3x squared, the first term. I see a plus sign, so let's write plus here. And if we know that 3 times 6 is 18, then 3x times 6 would give us the 18x. And now we have what's called a zero product. All right, and we know that anything times 0 is 0. So one of these factors has to be 0. Either 3x has to be 0, or that x plus 6 has to be 0. So we're going to write two equations. We're going to set them up. We have 3x equals 0 here first. And then we have the x plus 6. Well, that could be 0 too as well. So what you do is you set each factor equal to 0 and use the zero product rule. And you got to solve each. And these are pretty simple. We know that 3 times 0 is 0, so our first solution has to be 0. If you want to solve it, you can divide by 3, and you get x equals 0 here. 0 divided by 3 is usually 0, especially at 7:42 a.m. in the morning. Right, guys? 0 divided by 3 is usually 0. Not only that, 3 times 0 is 0. You can just look at it and see the solutions. By the way, look at the second one. What number plus 6 equals 0? Let me hear it. Come on, you guys are live on video here. What number plus 6 is 0? Yeah, you can just see the solution right there. But if you want to solve it, go ahead and subtract 6, and you can see it that way too. All right? 0 minus 6 is negative 6. So we have two solutions, 0 and negative 6. Remember, these quadratics have two possible solutions, and your goal is to find them both. All right. Now the next one is a little bit more challenging. What we're going to do is we're going to set it equal to 0 first, and we're going to get it into standard form right here, because right now it's not equal to 0. It's equal to 3. Everybody, what's the opposite of 3? Okay, we're going to add the opposite. So watch this in red. We're going to add the opposite to both sides, or you can say subtract 3 on both sides, because we know that 3 minus 3 is 0. See right here? The right side 0. 3 minus 3 is usually 0. So from left to right, we have 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. So the first step in that one is we set that quadratic equal to 0, and then we factor. Okay, so step 1, we set equal to 0. Step 2, we factor the quadratic. All right, and we're going to play a little game right now, okay? So in blue, we've got, let me see, we've got negative 3 times 2, and that's negative 6. And so we're going to ask ourselves, what two numbers multiply to negative 6, and in this case, add to negative 5? What two numbers multiply to negative 6 and add to negative 5? Now, if you want to find two numbers that multiply to negative 6, are 2 and 3 possible? Are the factors of 2 and 3 possible? I mean, we've got to make one of them negative to get a negative 6, right? Give me a vote, thumbs up or down. Are these two numbers possible? Give me a vote. If you make one of them negative, can they multiply into a negative 6 and add to a negative 5? Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no. And it just means you're not sure, of course. Okay, so I see a lot of thumbs down and some not sures. Okay, if you make the 3 negative, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, but if you add them, you get a negative 1. And that's not good. We want a negative 5. If we make the 2 negative, we get a negative 6. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. But they add to a positive 1. So neither factor works. Okay, so we can't choose 2 and 3, so I'm going to erase those. We're going to choose the only other two factors, and that's 1 and 6. So you put 1 and 6 in here, and you make one of them negative. Now, if one of them's negative, you're going to get a negative 6. Okay, but which one? You want to, when you add them, you get a negative 5. So which one has to be negative? The 1 or the 1 or the 6? Okay, so let's make it negative. Okay, so 1 plus negative 6 is negative 5. Okay, so now we're going to split the middle term, and I'm talking about this one right here. And we're going to do some factor by grouping and write small. Okay, so 2x squared plus x minus 6x minus 3 equals 0. It doesn't matter the order of the two middle terms there. You could have switched the two middle terms, no problem. On the first group here, you're going to factor out an x. So x times 2x plus x times 1. You got to remember, look at this. You got to distribute back through to check. You always mentally check you should have a document over there. There you go. That's the one on the right. You should have mentally or distribute mentally back through to check to make sure you get the previous step. All right? X times 2x is 2x squared. X times 1 is x. On the next two terms in the second group, they're both negative, so we've got to factor out the negative, and they're both divisible by 3, so you got to factor out a negative 3. So write down minus 3 times 2x plus 1. Remember, those binomials are going to be the same. And again, distribute back through mentally, okay? Not physically, write it down, but mentally distribute back through to check. And notice those binomials are the same, this one and this one. So, well, let's factor it out. Again, factor by grouping. So 2x plus 1 times the remaining factors, x minus 3. So we're going to have times x minus 3. Well, that's equal to 0. This is called a zero product because you're multiplying two binomials, and they obviously equal 0 here. So you got a zero product. So at this point right here, you're going to do the same thing we did in number 1. You're going to set each factor equal to 0. So let's write that down. After you factor, you set each equal to 0. All right? That means that we have to solve two equations. So 2x plus 1 equals 0. Draw a vertical line, and x minus 3 could be 0. So you're going to set each one equal to 0, just like we did in number 1. You're going to solve each, and you're going to find your two solutions. And you always play, the algebra game. I see a plus 1, so I'm going to subtract 1, add the opposite. And I get 2x equals negative 1. Then divide by 2, and you get x equals negative 1/2. That's your first solution. And the second one, that's simple. We know that 3 minus 3 is 0, so our answer is 3. If you want to show it, you just simply add the opposite here, and you get x equals 3. That's all based upon our first factoring lesson that we went through last week. Okay. And then our next lesson here, go open your notes to Q3. So turn the page. We solve by square roots. That was our second technique, okay? And this is an important one, the square roots, because everything from here on deals with square roots. All three techniques, the square root technique, completing the square technique, it takes square rooting, and the quadratic formula, well, that has a big square root in it too, so this is an important one. All right, so have your notes open to Q3 now, and everybody in the margin here, let's write down isolate the x squared. You'll notice that in your notes as well. That's the first thing I said. We've got to isolate your variable. Okay, you've got to isolate not just x, but x squared. Okay, so you add the opposite first again. If you see a minus 12, well, the opposite of a minus 12 is a plus 12, so you're going to add 12 to both sides. All right, and what you're going to get is you're going to get 3x squared, those cancel, equals 12. 0 plus 12 is 12. You always add the opposite first. Always. It's either a plus or a minus, depending on the sign of the numbers. Always add the opposite first. And then you still got to isolate the x squared. It's being multiplied by 3. The inverse of multiplication is what now? Division. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. Boom. Just go for it. Be bold. All right. 3 divided by 3 is 1 on the left. And you get x squared equals 4. Okay. X squared, 12 divided by 3 is 4. So after you isolate the x squared, everybody write down square root both sides. Okay, you'll see that in blue here. And then put your plus or minus symbol in there, because remember, quadratics have two solutions. We know that 2 squared is 4. We know you can already see the solutions right there. 2 is obviously an answer, but what other number squared gives you 4, guys? 2 and? You guys aren't following me here. Let me go back here. Let me erase this right here. Okay, This is what number squared equals 4? 2 squared is 4, so 2 is the solution. But what other number squared gives you 4? Negative 2. And that's why when you square root both sides like this and this, your answer is equal to plus or minus. Put the plus or minus in there. The square root of 4, which is plus or minus 2. That means 2 answers, 2 and negative 2. That's what that symbol means. There's actually 2 solutions to these quadratics. So remember, and let's highlight this, you have to have the plus or minus symbol in there. These are 2 solutions, not 1. That's a very important thing. In all square rooting cases, you're going to see that in all the lessons here, in all the techniques. Whenever you take the square root of both sides, you've got to have the plus or minus symbol, Dylan, and make sure you have 2 solutions. On this one here, same idea. Instead of isolating the x squared, you got to isolate your binomial squared, and you always add the opposite first on all of them. If you look at your notes, every single one we did, and we did a whole lot, we add the opposite first. And the opposite of a minus 9 is a plus 9, so go ahead and add 9 here to both sides. This should be pretty straightforward because I'm using very basic elementary algebraic ideas here. Add the opposite first. Okay, and you get your binomial. X minus 2 squared equals 9. 0 plus 9 is 9. And look at this. You got something squared equals 9. And just like the one before, we square root both sides. Okay, and this should be pretty straightforward. You square root the left side, and you square root the right side. Put the plus or minus symbol in there because you're going to have 2 possible answers. 2 possible answers. And remember, the square root cancels out the square, giving you x minus 2. That always, oops, you don't need parentheses here. So let me erase that. X minus 2, no parentheses needed, equals plus or minus the square root of 9. Give me some energy now with the root 9. Okay, so put plus or minus 3. You got to simplify the root. All right, if you see the square root of 9, you know that's 3. Now you're going to add 2 to solve. Be careful, just don't add the 2 and the 3 directly. That's the most common mistake I see. You write it out from left to right. We say 2. Okay, 2 is positive now. We added 2 to both sides, so the 2 is positive, and then we have plus or minus 3. So 2 plus or minus 3, and that gives us 2 answers. All right, it gives us 2 plus 3, or what, everybody? No, say 2 plus 3. What does that give you? You're on video now. Come on. 5. Come on, be bold. You know this. All right, and then the other one is 2 minus 3, or, be careful, what is it? It's not 1. What is it? Yeah, it's negative 1. All right, you got to keep track of your signs. So x is equal to negative 1 and 5. See, there's 2 solutions there. First you add, then you subtract. That's all you have to deal with here, guys. The plus or minus symbol means first you add, then you subtract. Okay, go up to number 5. Open your notes to Q4. Okay, this is my 4th lesson in the unit here. It's called completing the square technique. And in the margin, write down b divided by 2 quantity squared. B divided by 2 quantity squared. That's how you complete the square, where b in this case is 6. Okay? Now in that lesson there, question? You can ask questions even on video. This is okay. Well, don't hesitate to ask. Because what I'll do is when you guys ask questions is I'll repeat it on the video, and then I'll answer it, and it's still everything happens as normal. You guys don't have to worry about that. Okay, well, let's do a little side work here. We're going to, first of all, get the constant on the right. We're going to add 3 on both sides, get the constant on the right, so we can complete the square. So we have x squared plus 6x plus something, leave space, equals, let me see, 0 plus 3 is 3. Put an equal sign there, sorry. Equals 3 plus something. Remember, whatever you add to the left, you add to the right. You got to do that balancing act. You got to do the same thing on both sides of the equation. Okay, now in our case right now, b is 6. So I'm going to take 6 off to the side, divide it by 2, and square it. You always do that on the completing the square technique. What that does for us, as you're going to see in just a minute, is it makes it factorable. Because right now, that original polynomial is not factorable. Can't solve it by factoring. All right, so let's do it out loud. What's 6 divided by 2? 3. Okay, take 3 and square it. What do you get? 9. Okay, now add 9 here and add 9 here. Add it to both sides. That's called the completing the square process. Okay. Step 2 is we factor, just like we did in the first and second, well, the second problem. Okay, now let's play the game. here we go. What two numbers multiply to 9, okay, 9 right here, and add to 6? All right, put up two hands for me. Show me those two numbers on your fingers. Show me that you know what you're talking about here. What two numbers multiply to 9 and add to 6? Two numbers, two hands up. Show me the two numbers. You need two hands for it because there are two numbers here. Okay, and you guys are showing me 3 and 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 plus 3 is 6. It's also right here, right above it. Let me highlight it. It's right here. It's always half a b. It's always going to be that. If you look back at your lesson here, in every single case, it is always half a b. And so 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 plus 3 is 6. All right, let's factor by grouping now. Let's split the middle term. So you have x squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9 is equal to 3 plus 9, or 12. I just split the middle term like we always do in the factor by grouping. And then we're going to factor out the common factor and solve it by square rooting, believe it or not. Okay, so out of the first group, here's the first group, here's the second group. There's an x in common, so let's factor it out. Distribute mentally through. X times x is x squared, and x times 3 is 3x. And on the second group, there's a 3 in common because the 3 and the 9 are divisible by 3, so we got to factor out the 3. Write down plus 3 times. Well, you should know by now, after 3 weeks of this, and the factor by grouping, you should expect the same binomial, so expect an x plus 3. And then just don't write it down and not check. Distribute back through and check. Distribute back through and check. You should be in a habit of doing that. All right, always distribute it back through and check to see if you get the preceding step, the one before it. Okay, our common binomial is x plus 3, so let's factor it out. Okay, times the remaining factors. All right, x plus 3 again, that goes here. All right, and we have x plus 3 is equal to 12. And if you notice, if you go back through all the lesson and all the examples in the completing the square technique, these binomials are always the same. They will always happen like that. And so what you do is you write one of them squared. So anything times itself is itself squared, and you get x plus 3 to the second power equals 12. Now, if you look closely now, this looks just like number 4. Okay, and then if you have a binomial squared in number 4, we square root both sides. So guess what? That's what we do here. We square root both sides. Okay, everybody say square root. Okay, let's do it. All right, and put the plus or minus symbol in there. I'm going to highlight this. Put that plus or minus symbol in there. Why? Because we have two solutions. Okay. Now on the left side, the square root cancels out the square, giving you x plus 3. We're almost done too, by the way. And the plus or minus root 12, well, that root 12 has two factors. Put up two hands for me, please, everybody. Drop your pencils, put them up. Okay, show me the two factors of 12 on your hands. Two factors of 12 that we need, okay? There's two possible combinations, but we got to pick the right ones. All right? And you guys, most of you guys, or all of you guys, yeah, 4 times 3. Not 2 times 6, they're not squares, but 4 times 3. Good choice. We're going to split the root. Everybody say split the root. Okay, plus or minus root 4 times root 3. All right? And everybody knows that root 4 is 2. So we have x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 2 rad 3, or 2 root 3. You have to simplify the root. Okay, and the only thing we have to do is subtract 3 and solve for x. Okay, so minus 3, look in red. We've got a minus 3 and a minus 3. And that's going to be x is equal to, and again, you start off with a negative 3 here and then go plus or minus a 2 root 3. Be careful not to combine these terms because you cannot combine roots with non-roots. You're not allowed to add the negative 3 and the 2 there because, well, multiplication comes before adding and subtracting. So you can't combine a root with a non-root. You're actually done. You have actually two solutions here. Negative 3 plus the 2 rad 3, and the other solution, negative 3 minus the 2 rad 3. There are two solutions to these things. Okay? These things called quadratics. Now, I know I'm going a little bit fast because we're in review mode. That's why on the back side I have another set of equations for you guys to practice independently. And you guys are going to be using your notes and using these examples to help you facilitate. All right? And over the course of 3 days, we're going to get good. You're going to be building up your understanding as well as your speed. Okay, and the fourth technique that we have is the quadratic formula, and it's in lesson 5, so open your notes to lesson 5. Okay, this one's called the quadratic formula, and we're going to write it down. Get your red pen out. We're going to write it first. Okay, so we're going to write down x is equal to, and we have a big fraction here. It's also on the front board. Look straight ahead of you guys on the front board to the right of the screen up there. It's the negative b, or opposite of b. We can actually put that in parentheses if you want. Plus or minus the square roots of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. And that's the quadratic formula there. So the very first thing we do when we do this is we've got to determine a, b, and c first. You have to know what a, b, and c are before you even use the quadratic formula. And this is when it's set equal to 0 first, so write that down above it. This equation is already set equal to 0, but in general it may not be, so you have to remember to do whatever it takes before you find a, b, and c to get that thing equal to 0 first. Okay? Now write down a here, b here, and c here, and let's write down what they're equal to. Okay, here we go. Show me your thinking on your fingers, by the way, on this one here. Show me what a is on your hands. I want to see your thinking, because I can't tell can't read in your minds here. So show me your thinking. What's A? That's not everybody. I don't want to call your names out on the video, guys. Raise your hand. One hand up. Eyes up, guys. Eyes up. Show me A. No. Okay, A is 1. Okay. What's B? Is it 3 or negative 3? Very good. Negative 3. And C? Is 2. C is 2. Okay, once you determine that, you're good to go. All right, so here we go. Draw the big fraction bar there. It's a big fraction. I start off with the opposite of b, and b is negative 3. And notice I put that in parentheses right there. You substitute in a negative number. You're going to take the opposite of it or the negative of it. There's a double negative right there. Plus or minus the square roots. Notice the use of parentheses here. Negative 3 squared. Notice the use of parentheses. I see a lot of people drop off the parentheses, and that is not correct. Okay, you don't. Whenever you square a negative number, you must use parentheses. So negative 3 squared minus 4 times a, 1, times c, which is 2, all divided by 2 times a, which is 1. Always substitute first. Substitute first, okay, all right, and then simplify. It's basically a two-step process. You put the values in, that's called substitution, and then you simplify what you see. Okay, now get your eyes up top in the numerator, up there on the left. What's a negative of a negative 3? 3. There's a double negative there. Who does this? Who usually just cancels them out there like you see in red? All right, a double negative gives you a positive. A negative of a negative is a positive. So I'm going to say that x equals 3 plus or minus something, all divided by 2 times 1, or 2. The denominator is simple. 2 times 1 is 2. But what people have a difficulty with is inside the root, okay? So slowly, everybody look inside the root. You got a negative 3 squared. That's a negative 3 times a negative 3, which is? Give me some energy. 9, okay. That's always positive there. Whatever you squared is always positive. All right, now be careful here. I got a minus of 4 times 1 times 2. So minus, let's put that on the minus side. What's 4 times 1? Times 2. 8. So 4 times 1 times 2 is 8. So put down a minus 8. And all divided by 2. Well, 9 minus 8 is 1. So you have 3 plus or minus the square root of 1 divided by 2. What's the square root of 1? Yeah, it's just 1 because 1 squared gives you 1. So this is the same thing as 3 plus or minus 1 all divided by 2. Well, this means two things, okay? First you add, then you subtract. And that's what that plus or minus symbol is all about. So we have 3 plus 1 divided by 2. That's the first thing we get. All together, 3 plus 1? 4. Divided by 2? 2. So that whole thing's 2. Next one, 3 minus 1 divided by 2. First you add, then you subtract. All together, 3 minus 1? Divided by 2? 1. So you have two answers, and they are right here, 2 and 1. And that's all there is to it, guys. And there's a few other things too. Some equations are harder than others depending on the numbers, but those are all the techniques that you have to get good at. And over the course of 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're going to practice in class at home. You're going to use the solutions online and my videos online if you need them, okay, because some of you are going to need them, and work hard in class and at home and get ready for our big test on Friday. Now turn on the back side. All right, these are the same techniques but different equations. All right, so I want you to go in group mode right now, work with your partner. Mrs. Milby's going to come around. We're all going to work together here, and I'm going to develop the solutions here as well. And then when you get home, you can work on the other review document. All right, I'll see you in my next review video. This is Mr. Ames. We're signing off. Okay.